I'm Mike and welcome to the workshop. This week I'm going to do part 2 of my videos on shop stools. So if you haven't seen the previous video, I recommend you go watch it right now. Good, you're back. So I made this stool using simple tools and techniques, but it looks really nice. This is just screwed together and all the screw holes are filled with dowels and plugs. Now it's time to get a bit more. I'm going to make a second one of these, this time using far more advanced techniques. I'm going to construct the whole thing using wedged mortise and tenons. And yeah, it's completely unnecessary and way too complicated, but I love it. So, let's roll the intro! So this stool is going to be an exact match of the one I made last week, so I'm always going to be referring to this. The first thing I'm going to do, put that down where I can measure it. The second thing, because we're going to be using mortise joints and we need to clean out those mortises and we need to sharpen up our tenons, we need to make a slight adjustment to our shoulder jig video up here. And that also means it's time to introduce you to my new toy. So, let's go down there, I'll explain what I'm going to do, and yeah. So this is my new baby. It's a sliding table circular saw. You're going to be seeing it in a lot of the videos going forward because it's so handy. This will allow me to easily cut material down, put angles on it like I'm going to do now, and this sliding table here will easily allow me to cut panels and such for cabinets in the future. Now, these are very amazing tools, but you have to follow all the safety rules when you're operating. Always operate with sufficient guards in place. I've got eyes and ears. The first thing I'm going to do here, because our angle on our mortise is going to be 15 degrees, I'm going to take this piece of solid, put a 15-degree angle on it, so we can create a new fence for our shoulder jig. Right, so that made quick for that. Of course, you can always just do this by marking with a bevel square, planing it down flush, but this is much quicker. So now all I need to do is take off my old square fence, drill out for this, and attach this new angled fence, which will allow us to do all those mortises on angles. So here is our miter gauge. They come with saws of all sorts, and I'm going to take advantage of this sliding table as well. I'm going to lock it in place, and I'll use that then to cut my legs. Now I have this sacrificial piece on here, and I've already put a cut through so I can see where it's cut through here, and I can line my marks up and easily get it accurate. Now I've removed the crown guard here so you can see a bit better what's going on. You should always leave on any safety things that you can. This tool does have a limit in terms of how far I can reduce the blade and keep on the crown guard, so I'll probably look into getting one that can go over the top, but again, always keep your safety stuff on. Now, if you're interested in how to make up these panels or what sizes they are, I'll look at last week's video where I go into doing this. But for now, I'm just going to cut these up. So a note here on technique, if you do end up doing this yourself, you'll notice as I cut through here, once I'm through, I move the piece back away from the blade and then retract. I never retract while it's still in line with the blade because it can get caught. And coming up is probably the most important thing to note when you're using table saws. You can see here I have a little bit extra on this side, and it stays there with the edge of the blade. So what I do is use my push stick to remove that piece. You never want to put your hand anywhere near a blade. Always keep your push stick close. So here we are at the workbench. What I've done here is I've taken a piece of scrap with a square edge and I've actually drawn out the top of my stool. This will allow me to line up and mark for all my joints. I like to start with tenons on projects like this, so I'm just taking the top, using that as my depth gauge. I'll then score a line with my scalpel all the way along on all edges. That'll give me a sharp edge to work to when I'm cutting. The important thing with this one is because we're removing material either side to create the slopes and the sides are smaller than the top, is marking that middle line, the center line of the piece, and I use that center line then to mark out all my joinery, and that means that when I line it up to mark my mortises, everything is in the center. Important to this again, because I'm slanting those sides, is I mark that in first so I know where it's going to finish, and then mark coming out from the center all of my tenons. So this is pretty simple, that's why I'm going through it at this speed, and if you want a more in-depth discussion of the sizes and spacings I use here, comment in the comment section and I'll see what I can do for you. So when I have them all marked out, it's time to cut them, and that'll be what you see next. So I have my tenons all marked out here. You will have seen me using this, which is a wheel gauge. It's a very handy little tool. It just has a flat side on one end, which means that when you cut you get a perfect little shoulder. Particularly on angled mortise and tenons like this, I will cut my tenons first and then mark the width of my mortises off the cut tenons. Just gives you a little bit more accuracy, because the actual width of the tenon is on a diagonal when it goes through, and it can be hard to calculate that. So I'm just going to go cut my tenons now, and I'll bring you down and show you. I'm sure I said it already, but I can't reiterate how important it is to mark your waist. You don't want to cut on the wrong side. Now I've showed cutting tenons several times before, but I'll just quickly go through what I like to do. So I've scored all of these across with my razor blade, my scalpel. What I like to do is just cut into the line here using a very sharp chisel, being very careful of our hands. And what this does then is it gives me a little shelf, I mean it's only a half a mil thick, to sit my saw in to get a great start. And you want to work safely. I'm going to do this in reverse, but normally I wouldn't. You generally don't have to pull the chisel towards yourself in case it slips and goes into you. And we're just going to do that on all the waist sides to give us that shoulder. And I'm going to cut them using my Japanese saw. So for cutting the shoulders inside here, what I like to do is when I have the two end piece cut off, or in this case it's the second one, I haven't taken the middle out yet, is I just put it on my bench hook and cut maybe a mil away from the line. And I scored down the thickness here as well, gauge, and cut it down to that, and then I'll clean up the shoulders using the chisel. Well, cut the base here using a chisel. So here we are, we're set up in our shoulder jig with our new 15-degree bevel. The making of this is actually my most viewed video. I'd like to thank you all for that. So I like to use the biggest chisel I can to get straight edges. I use a smaller one then to bulk out, like here we are in the middle. So I'm just going to start by doing my edges here using my wide chisel and just work my way in slowly across. So when I'm bulking out the middle here, what I'm doing when I'm exaggerating here is I'm leaning the chisel back across the top. I'm not laying it in on the face. That means that if I burst through, I'm not cutting under. I work it back till I have a very small amount left, and I'm just barely floating at the bottom. Then I get my wide chisel to that final pass and get a beautiful crisp line all the way across. And the waist here is very important to stop breakout, particularly on this one because you have a very thin edge when you cut through. So you can see there now my fence is going this way as opposed to that way. And I'll just line everything up. And that'll allow me to do these cuts in, and when I'm doing the mortises, it'll allow me to mortise the other sides. So this done, all I'm going to do is do the exact same thing for the other side, and then we'll get on to marking our mortises. We'll cut our mortises on the top. That'll allow us then, when we have everything fitted, to mark and cut our mortises for our cross rail, which will be the exact same process. So I'm going to do a bit of chipping, get a cup of tea, but the next thing you'll see is these will be ready for marking mortises. Tea has been gotten and finished. Well, now I'm going to mark out for these mortises. So I have my full scale template here, and I'll start marking. So I have my top cut to size. I'm going to lay it here on my template and line it up perfectly. And what I want to do is with a sharp pencil mark the outside edge of where these legs are going to come up. I won't mark the inside because we'll end up with inaccuracies. So, yep, I'll leave that there for a second. So with that then, I'm going to mark for myself so I know. Yep. So it gets thinner on this side. So little witness marks. So I know it's going this way. I'll just get my set square, which has been set the same for the whole run. I'm just going to mark this again. I have to remember these are my outside edges. Yeah. So let's put a dot on this so I know it's the bottom. So with those marks in place, I'll just take my leg, line it up with that mark, sitting my tenon flush on the timber, and then with a sharp pencil I'll mark either side. That gives me the width of my tenon that I can then transfer down and mark the centres. So the next thing I want to do here is I want to mark a centre line on my top that will line up with the centre line that I have on my legs, and mark all my widths then lining these centre lines up. I also need to transfer that centre line down further, so when we have this fitted I can do the same with the cross rail. So you can see there I've continued my line here, and I'm placing it the way it's going to be assembled. So when it's assembled it'll be like this. I just line that up then with the end, line up those two center lines, and I can mark either side of my tenons. That gives me a width, and then using my square I can just mark down across the end. That then is going to be where my 10 mortises are. And I'll follow these lines all the way around to the other face, mark it on the other face, cut it with my handy dandy scalpel, and then we can start boring. So now we have all these marked out. If you've seen me do mortises before, this is how I like to do mortises. So I'm taking a bit that's about 1 mil smaller than the hole I want. Because it's on an angle here, I'm going to use my bevel square as a reference. And I'm going to come in from both sides, so I'm going to go about halfway with the angle going this way, then I'll flip it over halfway with the angle going that way. And I just need to make sure I'm looking at these lines to make sure I don't tilt it the wrong way. So, again, taking that as my reference in between my two lines, I'll go about halfway and remove the bulk of the material with this method. Just keep repeating that until we're done. Prior to the shoulder jig, I'll just chop out as much of the dross as I can without going through at the angle. I won't do too much of this because I've already shown it, but because there's a lot more material here, I'm starting out with a 6mm. I'm just going to chop away as much as I can in the middle, again leaning back like this, and then come back with my wider chisel to finish all those lines up. So these mortises are all done, and I've had to do a little bit of fettling on the tenons. It depends on who you are. Some people like to adjust the mortises to the tenons. I prefer to adjust the tenons, I think it's easy. So let's give these a test fit and see where we are. Now we don't want these too wide. I've taken a very slight pass on the top where it's coming through to make it a little bit wider. That allows for us to extend in, or pardon me, extend out when we shut in the wedge. And these are tight on the width, which is what I want. Let's put you back up here at the top. They're sitting perfectly on the top. Even there now, it's pretty secure. So just to explain a little bit better what you need with a wedged mortise and tenon is on the outside face you need to remove a small amount of material to create a wedge shape. When you glue it up then and you insert the wedges, that expands your tenon, so your tenon is actually locked in place like an internal dovetail. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get out a piece of MDF again. I'm going to put these where they're going to be, mark the insides. That'll allow me then to mark for the cross rail that's going here. And then it's just a matter of doing the exact same thing as we did before. So we'll mark our tenons on our cross rail. We'll cut them to size. Then we'll mark the mortises using those tenons on the sides here. We'll mortise them out. We'll have them fitted. And by the time we have that done, we should have something that looks like this. So now it's time to start doing some fine work. I'm going to cut our angles here on the sides and our little scallops. To cut here in all of these mortises to create a wedge, and then we're nearly done. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this little bandsaw and I'm going to cut my two sides. I'm going to put them together using the super glue masking tape trick, cut them at the same time, plane them at the same time, so they end up exactly the same size. And then using the little template we made from last week, I'll cut out our little scoop at the bottom using my jigsaw. So I now have all these stand up to 180, and I've cut my grooves in the end that I'm going to put my wedges in to expand the joint. What I've also done is taking the offcuts from cutting the sides here and glued them onto the faces. This means that then when it's assembled, I actually have a 90-degree face to glue onto, because these are at the same degree as this. They're both at 15 degrees the way I have it worked out. So now it's time to glue this up. The great thing about using wedged mortise and tenons, the clamps are only really needed temporarily until you get the wedges driven in and everything is locked together. I'll pull off all this tape before the tape sticks to the timber too hard. I'll wipe all of it down, let it dry, and then tomorrow I'll finish this up. So when everything is dry, all that's left to do is just cut off the wedges and then flush it up the surface using a combination of chisels and a sander, and then give everything the final sand, and it's ready for finish. So here we are, that's sanded, flushed, and now it's that time. Obligatory Danish oil time. Right, so there we have it. Our advanced shop stool using true wedged mortise and tenon joints. This thing is bulletproof. But when we compare it to the one we did last week, they're both pretty epic. So however you want to make your shop stool or whatever piece you're making, make sure to have fun. Enjoy it. That's what woodworking is all about. Making something out of nothing and getting out into the workshop and having a bit of fun. So, as always, thank you for staying to the end of the video. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. And on that, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone. By the time this video goes up, I will have crossed the 200 subscriber mark. It surprises me that 2 people, let alone 200, want to see the mad things I do and enjoy woodwork. So thank you again for that. And absolutely do try this at home. So I'm just going to go cut my tenons now, and I'll bring you down and show you. Now that I have the flipping camera on, I was sitting here talking to myself for the last 20 minutes. I'm going to use true mortise and tenons. Just going to scrap that whole thing.